everyone. This is Rakiyah Lenon, Editor-in-Chief of The Bell Ringer. Welcome to another episode of Chiming In, a production of Bell Ringer Phoenix Media. Today is March 20th, 2024. This afternoon, I am joined by Dr. Craig Albert. Albert is a political science professor at Augusta University. He is also the graduate director of the Intelligence and Security Studies Master's Program at AU. He's here to share some insight here today about the recent push in Washington to ban the widely used and Chinese-owned social media app TikTok. With 1 billion users worldwide and almost half the United States population using the app, it has become one of the most fastest-growing social media platforms in recent years. However, TikTok's ownership to a company outside of the United States has raised questions about national and cybersecurity concerns. We'll talk about that, as well as the likelihood of TikTok being banned and if there's anything users should know about. So thank you, Dr. Albert, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So first, what is a national security threat?
Oh, that's a great question. So it's basically anything that poses an existential crisis for the United States. So it's something that is so large scale that it can interrupt the daily business of the nation, so society, politics, anything like that that's a big disruptor. And so it can threaten our power, prestige, and reputation, internationally. And so a national security threat is really anything that disrupts the maintaining of where the United States is in the international system.
Okay. And what is a cybersecurity threat?
Same thing, just put on cyberspace. So it's a threat that somebody poses to the United States that originates from cyberspace, and it can be in two forms mainly right now. It can be a physical cyber attack. So that would be something that would be targeting like networks, infrastructure, things of that nature, computers themselves, hardware, software, things of that nature. Or it can be an informational attack. So it's something that is cyber enabled because somebody's using a computer, somebody's using the internet, but it takes place on social media. And that usually takes the form of information warfare. And so that's a cyber threat in that space.
And with everyone having cell phones now, that's easier more now than ever.
And that's right. So they usually combine now, and we call them cyber-enabled influence operation because you're using a cyber tool, let's say a phishing scam, where somebody tries to trick you to click a link on your phone or on your computer, for instance. Generally, they gather that data from your social media sites because they're harvesting your data on social media sites, sending you an email that's targeted to you. So this happened kind of to me recently where I was targeted because I'm an endurance runner. So they got wind of this, and ads popped up on my Instagram for a shoe sale. Oh. And it was like 90% off. And I was like, I'm going to get these shoes. So it was targeted perfectly for me. And I wanted the shoe so bad that I fell for it. And so I clicked it. And within like 1 minute, they had charged like thousands of dollars on my credit card. And so I was like, but that's a cyber enable. I took care of it. But that's how sophisticated they are because they know who you are. They know what you like. So they knew that I liked running because if you look at my Instagram, it's all like long distance running people and things of that nature. And so they targeted that ad for me. And then they stole my identity based on that. So that's having that cell phone and not being very careful. Even somebody that does this for a living like me, right? Like fell for the trap. That's how dangerous it is. So you have to be really vigilant. And that's called a cyber-enabled influence operation.
Okay. That's great that you explained that. And so I guess why are politicians and lawmakers kind of viewing TikTok now as a national security threat?
Yeah, perfect question. So the Chinese Communist Party owned TikTok. China itself is what we call a strategic adversary to the United States. A strategic adversary means it's one of the United States' main near-peer competitors for international security, meaning if war was likely to break out with the United States by any country, it's most likely going to be one of the strategic adversaries of the United States that war would occur. Right. So the United States' strategic adversaries right now are Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and some people say Venezuela is becoming a strategic adversary. So we also have non-state actors that are strategic adversaries such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So you throw all those together, any given day, war is more likely between a strategic adversary with the United States than any other country. So if you take this idea that China and its main leading group, which is the Chinese Communist Party, owns TikTok, and what TikTok is, that means that the Chinese Communist Party can literally cognitively hack your mind of 180 million Americans that are on TikTok, meaning that if the United States was ever to engage in warfare with China, they would have direct access to 180 million individuals that they can steal identity from, that they can push agendas to through propaganda from TikTok, to change your opinion on something, to foment rebellion, to cause chaos, to sow discord, to put groups against each other. All types of chaos could result from this. And so TikTok is a national security threat to the United States because it's owned by the Chinese Communist Party. All the other social media apps also have these capabilities of being able to push agendas, being able to influence you, being able to shift your allegiance to one, politician to another, or, to some new fad or something like that. But the difference is they're owned by individuals within America. And so they don't necessarily pose the same type of security threat that one owned by the Chinese Communist Party has, because they're going to use it for nefarious purposes in the event of warfare. And that's the scary part. Instagram does the same thing, but it's owned by Meta, that's owned by Mark Zuckerberg. The United States can control that a little more, ask for regulations, try to work with Facebook, try to work with Meta to control what they do. You can't do that with something that's owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And they see themselves as potentially going to war with the United States by the year 2050.
And you bringing up Instagram also kind of led me to want to ask about Meta. And I know they recently came under fire for kind of the whole thing with Facebook and like watching and tracking users. And so knowing that another app is basically doing the same thing, except for it's owned outside of the United States, that's what's growing the cause. Right.
That's the main point. And all social media apps do this. All apps on your phone do this. So many people don't know that. They collect all the data. So if you agree to have that app on your phone, all your data is being collected by them. The danger part of it is that most people don't recognize is generally the same company buys that data from all your individual apps. And they put together a user profile of you. And then once they get this user profile of you, they resell ads back to those same apps that specifically target things that they know you're interested in. So it's really, that's called micro-targeting is how they operate. But they get this whole user profile so they can pinpoint, like in my example, they know I'm going to click an ad that's for 90% off for shoes. That's terrifying, right? That they know me that much. That I fell for that micro-targeted scam. So if you think about that being in the hands of an enemy, of somebody that says they're going to go to war with us, like, wow, that's terrifying that they could have. What could they do? What theoretically could the Chinese Communist Party do to 180 million American users on TikTok if they wanted to go to war with us, or even if they didn't want to go to war with us, but just wanted to influence an election, for instance, influence how we think as a population. Maybe they want to have the same objective as Russia. Russia seeks to cause race wars within the United States. So they pit different ideologies and different extremist views on race in the United States against each other. So that's one of their main objectives on influence operations. They use Facebook and Twitter or X to do this a lot. So if China wanted to do that and try to spread racist views, try to spread white supremacism, try to spread Black Lives Matters, but put it against like other races. If China wanted to do that to 180 million users on TikTok, think of like the potential catastrophe that could cause. So Russia has been capable of creating riots in the United States by this, by putting white supremacists next to BLM protests, for instance. So you might have seen on the news, they're like, oh, there's this white supremacist protest. Across the street, there's a Black Lives Matter protest. Like, how did that happen? How did the government arrange licenses for these protests with these two powerful groups right next to each other? Russia instigated it all. Russia caused it all. Russia caused them to meet at this place, caused the other group to meet at the other place, hoping that they would fight and cause civil unrest and protests. So if Russia is doing that at the level that they are, what could China do to 180 million Americans on TikTok with that? And that's the national security threat. Like if they really wanted to sow violence and sow discord in the United States, they have the potential in 180 million users' phones, which is terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And what about people who say, well, the government is spying on us anyway, like, big deal. Like, what do you say to those people?
Well, There's some that's a complicated question. Good question. Woo, this is a tough interview. All right. So the U.S. government by law can't spy on U.S. citizens. It's against the law. They can't target you unless you do something that violates terrorism protocols or something like that. And even then, they don't know it's you that they're looking at. They look at like an anonymized profile of something, and then they have to take that to a court to get a warrant to go any further, to actually tie a name or a social security number to it, right? So it's pretty safe. Even if you're suspected of like domestic terrorism, you have to go through a serious legal system for the domestic agencies to spy on you, and it's very rare that warrant is given. So the government doesn't do that, but the social media apps and the social media firms do that in your phone. So most of these apps are listening to you through your phone. If you don't know how to turn off your settings properly, they're listening to you at all times, even when you're not on the phone. They have access to your camera. So they have access to your pictures, everything like that. You've given them access. So it's 100% surveillance that all these social media firms have over you and all of your life. And they can use these because you've agreed to it through your privacy control settings and your user, what's it called? The guidelines or whatever that you agreed to, and none of us ever read it. Like,
the terms of agreement
and all that kind of stuff. Like Facebook's is like 100 pages. Like, I'm not reading that. Like, and you just gave them the right to do all this stuff via your phone, and so they can spy. That's what they're doing. They're spying on you constantly. So I don't think if you're not doing anything suspected of domestic terrorism or something like that, the government's not going to spy on you. It might broadly listen out for those types of things, but they're not targeting any individuals unless they're get a FISA warrant by the United States legal system. So that's not really a big concern.
Okay. And about college students as well, this age group, 18 to 25 or even younger, it's common for them to be on social media. And so what are the dangers and concerns for like younger audiences and younger people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's several problems that come from this age group, particularly even looking at social media sites. So the first is like issues with self-image. Right. So constantly people, especially of this age group, but even younger, right, are comparing themselves to, these influencers online and then developing that are, photoshopping their images using generative AI to make themselves look better. And they post these pictures of themselves on Instagram to make themselves look more muscular, more toned or more beautiful, whatever that term means. And if we're on Instagram, we're constantly comparing ourselves to that, right? So we can develop unrealistic themes of what like the human body should look like or how we should act or how we should feel or things of that nature. So as a result of that, suicide rates are higher amongst social media users than non-social media users, for instance. Feelings of anxiety are astronomically higher from using social media. Insomnia, astronomically higher rates from using social media for this age group in college. So in college, you're already under stress. You're already dealing with like, can I get some exercise in? Like, because I have all these classes, I might have work, I might have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. So you're trying to balance all this other stuff. And now you have like unprovoked stress and anxiety and depression and self-image issues given to you by the social media. And some of the social media apps purposely push this type of material to you. So Facebook, for instance, in 2021, stated that most of the stories they pushed were meant to cause anger in their users. They purposely sent ads, stories to users on Facebook within the United States that would provoke understandings of anger in the user, because anger causes you to click more and to read more of the similar stories. So Facebook gets more revenues from their ads that you're looking at from that. So think about that. They purposely wanted to make you feel angry. Like, so that effect that they can have on college students is just terrifying.
And is there anything that these social media companies, specifically TikTok, could do that would allow it to kind of gain the trust of the United States? I've heard talks of it. If it was sold to a company in the United States, would that make it better for users to kind of feel more comfortable using? Or should they kind of take limitations or precautions right now? What should users kind of think of?
Well, for TikTok, particularly for it not to be a national security threat, it needs to get out of the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. So that's the biggest thing. So if the Chinese Communist Party sold it, it has an American CEO, somebody that's in America, but that's a front. The data can still be accessed by the Chinese Communist Party. So there needs to be a complete severance of ties between users in the United States and the Chinese Communist Party for TikTok to not be a national security threat. That takes care of the national security threat. The general threat that social media and apps pose to us as citizens, for instance, causing negative emotions in us, having the potentials for riots or misinformation and disinformation and propaganda just to be thrown around. So, we no longer know what's really true because we trust social media so much. So that needs to be regulated, not necessarily by government, but by the social media firms themselves. And some of them are starting to do this. So, X recently rolled out its safety protocols where it'll tell you that this is a government-sponsored tweet. So, it might be propaganda, or it'll have fact checks underneath some of the tweets that are put out there by different individuals, or say, caution, this person might be known for misinformation or disinformation and things of that nature. I've tweeted stuff where that's showed up under me because my research is in this area. And so they're like, caution, this person engages in disinformation. And I'm like, for research, like not for real. But social media, and this is the balance, right? That social media firms I think they have a obligation to protect the individual in the United States from being lost too much in the social media world. And so they should self-impose these types of regulations where they're going to try to tell you when propaganda might be happening. They're going to try to give you some context for some of these stories, some of these posts and things of that nature. But we don't want government regulating it too much and government banning these too much, because that does violate freedom of speech of the companies themselves. American-owned companies have freedom of speech protected by the United States. TikTok's a different example because it's owned by the Chinese government. So does it have the same freedom of speech access, and therefore can it be banned easier than other social media apps? I would argue, yeah, because it's not an American entity, so it's not protected the way American companies are protected. So I'm kind of against government regulations on social media, but I think the government should encourage social media in general to put their own self-regulations to help protect people, like cyberbullying, right? Like they need to make sure that they do a good job of taking down harmful ads, violence that's depicted on social media. They need to do a better job of taking that down, and several platforms are working on that. And working on, delaying like a live stream perhaps, because some of the mass shootings we have in the United States have been live streamed on Facebook, right? And that tends to cause others to want to engage in the same type of behavior. So Facebook's trying to say, okay, you can live stream, but maybe it should be a 5-second delay so, people can make sure that it's not something that's violence and going to cause harm to somebody before everybody in America has the right to see this. So there's things like that social media firms can do that don't really take away their rights or liberties and don't take away the individual citizens' rights or liberties, but that provide more protection based on how dangerous these sites can be.
And I know freedom of speech definitely has kind of come up as a concern or issue for people. Like, hey, we have freedom of speech. Like, we should be able to kind of use these platforms to be able to say what we want. And in addition to kind of that freedom of speech aspect, people are also using it as a form of employment. Like, they're becoming influencers or even promoting their business or company on TikTok, and it's blowing up and getting all these views or things like that. So, are we as a society become extremely reliant on apps in social media places like TikTok? And with that kind of, I guess, if it were to be banned, how do you see that affecting possibly the livelihood of Americans who kind of have become reliant or dependent on it?
This is probably the toughest issue, is balancing, the right to economic liberty with the national security of the United States. And so with each of these national security issues, you have to balance a plethora of rights and liberties with the national security apparatus of the United States. And it's a tough decision to make, that, congressional leaders and presidents have to decide whether or not to, prevent certain rights and liberties from existing for certain people in order to more securely protect the United States. And so you'll see through time that the United States has, and even the Supreme Court, for instance, has favored national security over individual rights, even economic rights of people. When the threat to national security has, it's a clear and present danger, then the rights and liberties of the individual decrease for the security. Because if you don't have a secure nation, then there's no such thing as a secure individual, meaning that there's no rights or liberties within the individual because you're not secure. So in those instances, the United States has to put national security as a priority over the rights of individuals, including economic rights and liberties of individuals. And other times, and this is usually, this is figured out by the Supreme Court usually, right? So if TikTok's banned, for sure somebody's going to sue and it'll go through the court system and likely end up in the Supreme Court. And it'll be the Supreme Court's issue to decide, is this such a threat to national security that it's worth disrupting and hurting individual lives in America? Or are the rights and liberties of the individuals of the United States more important than the threat that TikTok poses to the United States' national security? And so every issue is a balance that the court system has to decide for itself. Personally, and I hope I don't get on any influencers in Augusta's bad side on this, personally, I think this issue is so bad for national security that I think there should be national security outweighs the individual in this particular case with TikTok. And I think a way out of that is, like you mentioned earlier, TikTok being sold to an American owner. And then we still have all those, surveillance issues of TikTok that will never go away, like all social media sites. But at least it's not in the hands of a strategic adversary. And I think that's the biggest part of, if you take that out of the equation, then that national security threat automatically dissipates. It goes away overnight.
And so what advice do you have for social media users in general?
Limit your time on social media, right? Sometimes I often say go on your desktop app instead of your phone, because the algorithm tends to work differently if you use it through your browser than if you have the app on your phone. It gets a little confused for some reason. And so they're less likely to be able to track what you're doing all the time. They also lose microphone and picture access from your phone at that time. They might gain it if you're doing it on your laptop again, but it still messes up the algorithm a little bit. And the algorithm is what pushes out all the dangerous information to you, all the potentially dangerous information to the users. So I would say limit it. If you can, use it. So I don't use the Instagram app usually. I just use it on my browser. It's like, it's not as cool looking. It's harder to navigate that way. But that does two things: protects the algorithm from influencing me too much, or disrupts the algorithm just enough so that it doesn't really influence me. B, it's so boring doing it that way that I'm not doom scrolling. So my depression rates aren't going to go through the roof. I'm not going to have insomnia, things of that nature, because my time's going to be limited. So limit your time on it. Never trust any source on social media. So never think that it's accurate, that it's reliable. Always verify the information before you take it as your own. And so I think that's basic, media literacy. And we just need to apply what we do with newspapers, what we do with information in general, to social media. For some reason, between the ages of 18 and 35, people are more likely to believe what they see on social media than not. And then other age groups as well. They believe more than other age groups what they see as social media as being true. And so the biggest advice, especially to college students, is like, no. Like immediately, like look into that. Like don't assume it's true, even if it seems like a valuable, verifiable source. Go and check it somewhere else before you believe that information is true. Like double, triple check with different sources to make sure that you're not a victim of propaganda and things of that nature. And then 3, we'll keep it.
Stick at those 2.
Yeah, just stick those 2.
And that's definitely great advice for sure. And is there anything else you'd like to share on the topic?
I just, have fun on social media, but not too much. As a professor, I'd say, for every post you read on social media, go read a book, right? Make sure that you maintain your academic reading, and you can think creatively, critically, and rationally at all times. So I know we get lost in the world of social media, but try to balance that with other aspects of, informing your intellect and creating a balanced brain, a balanced lifestyle as well. for every, use my method. For every post I create or for every, 10 minutes I'm on Instagram, I got to run 10 miles. So do that, do that. If you're out there running, you're not going to be looking at social media too much.
Exercise.
Just exercise instead. Absolutely.
So again, thank you so much, Dr. Albert, for coming on the show today.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you so much.
And thank you for listening. Once again, Chiming In is a production of Bellringer Phoenix Media. It is produced at the TVC Lab on the Summerville campus of Augusta University. Jasmine Garcia is the producer and lab coordinator. Alex Gonzalo is the video producer. Comments mentioned here are those of the host and panelists, not Augusta University. Be sure to find us at www.aubellringer to hear from more guests. This is Rakiyah Lenon, hoping you'll chime in too. Join us next time and have a great day.